So Kuro have finally revealed Zani's signature weapon along with the full information of the stats that it provides. So in today's video, we'll be diving a bit deeper into the pull value of this weapon by analyzing how it easily synergizes with Zani. To give you guys an idea of what you should expect, its synergy with other characters from a free-to-play perspective, other weapon options available for Zani, and finally my recommendation if you should pull for this weapon or not based on several situations. If you're new here on the channel, the name is Senpai and I make videos that helps you improve in every aspect of Wuthering Waves, so be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already because it helps me out more than you know. Without further ado, let's get into it. For the stats, she's rocking a crit damage of 48.6%, which explains why the base attack is quite high when compared to other crit damage signature weapons, like the Whispers of Sirens for example. The high base attack is actually really good since Zani's role in your team building, according to the information provided by Kuro Games, is a damage focused role or a main damage dealer to do a high percentage of your team's overall damage, so having a high base attack is absolutely necessary. The passive is where things get a bit more interesting because this weapon is actually the second of its kind, with the first one being Phoebe's signature weapon due to how they buff Spectral Frazzle damage. For the passive, the first part buffs attack by 12%, which is nothing special because you can easily gain attack percentage from your Echo substats. The second part will grant the wielder 8% defense resistance shred after casting basic attacks and amplify Spectral Frazzle damage dealt by 50% for 6 seconds at rank 1. While the 8% universal defense shred is not that big of a damage boost, it's really good since every gauntlet user in the game right now can easily activate it by casting basic attacks regardless of how the Forte circuit modifies their abilities, because keep in mind that it works by just casting basic attacks but not necessarily dealing basic attack damage, so there's basically no restriction. This allows it to be a very versatile option that you can slap on literally any gauntlet user in the game. However, the second part that amplifies Spectral Frazzle damage by 50% is what makes this weapon special specifically for Zani. From her kit information provided by Kuro Games, she appears to be a dual scaling type DPS character since her heavy slash daybreak, heavy slash dawning, heavy slash light smash, and heavy slash nightfall are all considered Spectral Frazzle damage and heavy attack damage. To provide a bit of clarity, daybreak, dawning, Light Smash, and Nightfall are all special attacks that Zani can unlock when she goes into her liberation state called Inferno Mode, while having stacks called Blaze, which she can get by consuming Spectral Frazzle that other characters like Phoebe or Spectral Rover can apply on enemies. Before the addition of Zani on the character roster, the only skill type damage that you had to worry about was basic attack damage, resonance skill damage, heavy attack damage, and resonance liberation damage, but character scaling of negative status effects like Spectral Frazzle was to be expected since negative status effects are now a very important part of the game's core mechanics. However, this also promotes team versatility due to the split scaling, so sub-DPS buffers like Mortefi, a 4-star character, can be a decent option if you don't have Phoebe on your account, who is currently the best support for Zani due to her ability to apply a lot of Spectral Frazzle stacks than Spectral Rover in her confession state, and her outro amplifies Spectral Frazzle damage by 100% for Zani, which is absolutely insane since Zani scales off Spectral Frazzle damage as I previously mentioned. With the easily accessible team including Zani and Mortefi, Spectral Rover can act as the healer to use Rejuvenating Glow since their S4 heals, and Rover can act as a sort of a buffer for Zani as well since her S6 shreds spectral resistance by 10%. What this means is that if you plan to play the easily accessible team, it's highly recommended to get Zani's signature weapon due to the loss of Spectral Frazzle damage amplification, which can increase your damage by quite a lot. Now that her synergy with the weapon is out of the way, let's dive a bit deeper into this weapon's synergy with other characters that you may have on your account. Looking at the current roster, the notable gauntlet DPS characters that can make use of this weapon include Zhang Liao and Ling Yang. The problem with these characters that you might face if you want to run this weapon on them is that their skill tree does not have crit rate on them. Zhang Liao has crit damage and Ling Yang has glacial damage bonus. So if you plan to run this weapon on any of these characters, the highest crit rates that you can get will be about 60%, even if you roll crit rate and crit damage on every piece of your echoes. But that won't be an issue because Showkeeper's rerun provided most players the chance to grab a copy of her, but do keep in mind that running this weapon on such characters will make them heavily depend on Showkeeper. For the Zhang Xin mains out there, feel free to use this weapon since Zhang Xin has crit crit rate on her skill tree, so you can expect around a total of 70% crit rate if you roll crit rate substats on all your echo pieces. If you can't afford to pull for this weapon, you're in luck, because Zani's weapon alternatives are actually looking pretty good. The first one that I recommend and should take higher priority is the Tragic Comedy, which is Roach's signature weapon due to the high base attack, crit rate substats, and Zani's synergy with the passive of the weapon. You can easily gain the heavy attack damage bonus while Zani is in her liberation state by just spamming your basic attacks, which according to her kit description allows her to perform Daybreak, Dawning, and Nightfall in that sequence respectively. The next best alternative is Zhang Liao's signature weapon. Similar to Roach's signature, this weapon also has a high base attack and a crit rate substat suitable for any DPS character like Zani. The second part of the passive is not entirely useless though. From Zani's official kit description, when she activates her liberation, she gains access to another liberation skill cast called the Last Stand when her Blaze Forte stacks are less than 30 or 8 seconds after casting her liberation. And since the specific damage scaling of Last Stand was not stated in a kit description, it'll most likely scale off Resonance Liberation damage, prolonging the buff duration long enough for the Last Stand to benefit from the 48% liberation damage bonus will not be a problem, because Zani can use her new skill called Scorching Light, which becomes available when she enters the Inferno state, and using it can trigger Heavy Slash, Light Smash if she's attacked when the skill is cast, or if she's not attacked after pressing the Scorching Light skill, she'll perform Heavy Slash Daybreak instead, and spamming your basic attacks will follow up with Dawning and Nightfall. So basically what I'm trying to say is that Zani can easily prolong the liberation buff duration very easily so that the Last Stand can deal decent damage. The worst 5-star option is the Abyss Surges. The only benefit that Zani can get from the passive is the energy regen that it provides, and the basic attack buff is useless because while her normal basic attacks get buffed after casting her liberation, it does not have any synergy with her main damage sources with skills of heavy attack and spectral frazzle damage. So it's most likely a quality of life change to provide you with a reason to stay on Zani for quite some time, even after all her blaze stacks have been depleted. But in endgame content, you're probably not going to use this that much, since you most likely switch her out when her blaze is depleted. The best 4-star option is the Stonard, mainly due to the crit rate substat that it provides, but the liberation damage buff from the passive can also be good to buff the damage from the Last Stand liberation skill cast, as I mentioned earlier. The second best 4-star option is the Legend of the Dragon Hero. It has an attack substat, and the passive also buffs attack by 16% at rank 1 when you deal damage to enemies with any type of negative status effects on them, including Spectral Frazzle. That pretty much sums up our weapon alternatives. Now here are my recommendations, which can help you decide if you should pull for this weapon or not, depending on the type of account that you have. If you have Phoebe on your account, the buffs that she provides for Zani from her outro skill is absolutely insane, because it's a damage amplification type of buff which has its own separate scaling, so it increases your damage quite significantly. If you have Phoebe's weapon, it makes it even better because activating Phoebe's outro will buff Spectral Frazzle damage by 30%, which is good because Zani scales up Spectral Frazzle damage. Hence, having Phoebe alone is a significant upgrade for Zani, so if you fall into this category and you can't afford to pull for her weapon, it's totally fine if you have the best alternatives that I previously mentioned. However, if you don't have Phoebe and you plan to use Spectral Rover, Zani's only access to Spectral Frazzle damage amplification will be through her weapon, so pulling for her signature weapon becomes very necessary if you want Zani to do decent damage. Another thing that you should keep in mind is that based on her kit description, Zani will need 19 Spectral Frazzle stacks applied on the enemy so that she can regenerate full forte stacks called Blaze, and since Spectral Rover applies only 10 Spectral Frazzle stacks per rotation, your DPS can be significantly low compared to a Phoebe team composition. So if you're not getting Phoebe in phase 1 of the anniversary banner, it's highly recommended to at least get Zani's weapon so that she can do decent damage per rotation. In case you're wondering if it's possible to apply the maximum 19 Spectral Frazzle stacks per rotation with Spectral Rover on the enemy for Zani to do damage, don't worry, because we can most likely tweak their rotation a bit to squeeze in 2 liberation skill casts from Spectral Rover. Think of it as the double brand forte skill nuke with Sanwa in a Hyper Carry team composition where Sanwa can use her liberation twice per rotation. And this seems feasible because it does not state in Zani's kit description that she'll exit Inferno mode when you switch to another character. so we are free to apply more spectrofrazzle stacks as long as Inferno mode does not run out on Zani. I'll provide more details after testing in a dedicated guide video, so be sure to look forward to it. That's all for my weapon pull value analysis for Zani. Hope this video provided value to you, and if it did, leave a like and subscribe to help support the channel because it's free and you can always change your mind. Be sure to also join our community Discord if you're having any issues with the game or you just want a place to chill or hang out. Link will be in the channel description. Catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.